Hey everyone, it is so good to be back with you this week on Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is one of those days we celebrate every year, and sometimes we forget the reason that we're celebrating it is a question. And the question is, who is in control of your life? Who is the one who gets to make the decisions, who sets the plan, who plots the course for your life? For the last couple of weeks, my life has not been what I've wanted it to be as I tested positive for COVID and then have been struggling with it for the last several weeks. It's been one of those things where each day they would send me a text message where I had to click on all of the symptoms that I was experiencing that day. And over the course of the first 10 days that I had it, I clicked on every single one of those symptoms that they were looking for, except for losing taste and losing smell. Those were two things that other people get that I didn't have at all. But I'm going to tell you, there were days in the midst of that when I would have done anything to get rid of what I was going through. Like there were some scary moments. There were some times when I really did not feel well. And I would do anything that they told me to do in order to get out of it. If I had any trust in you at all, I was going to be willing to do what you said to do. And then I started to get better. And fevers finally broke and chills went away. And I started to feel like I was getting back to normal, and fatigue was getting a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less, and so I started to do some things. And then after a couple of days of that, I got hit with it again, like the whole day. I just wanted to sleep. Couldn't focus enough to read or do anything else, and I discovered really quickly that with this thing for me, there are victories, but they're not necessarily permanent victories. Like, I'm not exactly sure when this total healing is going to come. I'm not exactly sure how it's all going to work out. I just know that I wish I could get rid of whatever it is that I'm going through right now, but I don't have a lot of control over how to do that. Maybe you've been feeling that way before too, right? You're going through life, you're in the wilderness, and suddenly you get a victory and you start to feel like things are getting better, and then something else hits you right away, and you wished that the last victory was a permanent victory, but it wasn't, and you're right back in the mix. Right back feeling alone, feeling unsure about what to do, feeling uncertain about the future, not knowing exactly where to go or where to turn. I think David experienced that in 1 Samuel chapter 24. This is one of the stories of David out in the wilderness before he's king. And not only does he deal with this wanting to be free from these little mini victories and wanting to get to the permanent victory, it also has him have to answer the question, who is in control of David's life? So here's the story. David and his men have been on the run for a long time, much longer than they thought they should, much longer than they really needed to be, because they're being treated as outlaws. Because Saul, who's the king at the time, is jealous of David. He knows his time is running short, and he does not want to deal with that. And so he would rather try and take things into his own hands and kill David and get rid of all of his men than allow God to do what he has said he's going to do. And one thing has led to another for David and his men. Like, they never find any place to just kind of settle in and be home. The people that they trust one day are the ones they have to worry about betraying them the next day. And it is not a good way to live. And they almost got caught by Saul. They got to the place where Saul was on one side of the mountain and they were on the other, and he was going to overtake them when word came that the Philistines were attacking Israel. And so Saul had to leave David behind to go and protect the rest of the country. And David and his men caught their breath, and they thought maybe this was the way that God was going to deliver them. That maybe now they could kind of sit back, relax, catch their breath, get back their strength, and be ready to go again. But just after God delivers them in this way, Saul comes back again, and he knows exactly where they are, and he's hunting them once more. And this is what happens in 1 Samuel chapter 24. It says, after Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. And he came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. So basically we have a literal potty story where Saul goes and hunts down David, and he catches up to them faster than he's expecting, and he has to go to the restroom. And the restroom back then was the caves that were along the side. And someone on Saul's team failed miserably. Because instead of going in and securing the cave and making sure it was safe and that there was no one or no thing that could harm his king, Saul ends up going in there alone to go to the restroom, but he's not alone. He's there with David and every one of David's men. Talk about an opportunity to get out of the wilderness. At least that's what David's men saw. The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, 'I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish.'" And so David crept up unnoticed and cut a corner of Saul's robe. This was the moment that David's men had been waiting for. There was relief right in front of them. There was escape. There was vindication all right there to be taken in this moment. They were about to become the best friends of the king of Israel. No more running and hiding in caves. No more fearing for your life. No more worried about who's getting ready to betray you. All David had to do was go up to Saul, who was using the restroom, and bring his sword down on his head right there. All David had to do was go and kill the Lord's anointed. And then he could be the king. He could be the one who was anointed. Because God had already promised him the throne. Now was the moment to seize this opportunity and take it. But David doesn't bring his sword down on Saul's neck. Instead, he simply cuts a corner of his robe. And this didn't exactly go over well with his men, who were tired of running and hiding in caves just like this, who wanted to get back to their families, who were tired of being considered outlaws, who saw this as an opportunity from God himself to go and take care of everything that they'd been in the middle of. But it says, afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut a corner of his robe. And he said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lift my hand against him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." And with these words, David rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went on his way. Why didn't David use this opportunity? Why didn't he seize the day, as Robin Williams always told us to do? It's because not every opportunity is created equal. This one was an opportunity for David to kill Saul, to take things into his own hands, and to do it in a way that would go against what God had already told David to do. See, God had anointed Saul. He was chosen by God to be king. And David knew that to raise his hand against the king, against the one that God had anointed, would be to go against what God had told him to do before. And you can't have an opportunity where in order to seize it, you have to do what God has told you not to do, and still have that be an opportunity that God is going to bless. David would not do it. Of course, David wanted to get out of the suffering. Of course, he was ready for the promises of God to be fulfilled. Like he'd been promised the throne already at this point years ago. He's been waiting years for God's promises to be fulfilled. And maybe all these little victories he gets every once in a while, like killing a giant or being praised by the people, that's nice and all, but after that comes the being hunted. After that becomes having to pretend like you're insane. After that comes being betrayed by the people you're sworn to protect. And he's ready to be done with that. He's ready for the promises of God to be fulfilled, but he is not willing to fulfill God's promises his own way. He is only willing for God to fulfill his promises God's way. How would sinning against God to do God's will make any sense? What's going on here is David is deciding who is in control. It would be easy to say that David was in control and that he was justified in doing what he was doing. The popular opinion was behind him. Every one of his men was ready for this to happen. The voices of his trusted friends told him, David, this is it. This is the moment. Go and take advantage of it. It fit how the world works, right? If you see an opportunity, you seize it. You do what's best for yourself in that moment, right? If someone's trying to kill you, you kill them first. This is how you solve the problem. And so it makes sense to us. The only issue is that God has said something different to him already. And so it becomes the difference between David's ways and God's ways. It's the same thing for us so often. It's the difference between doing what God has said to get to the promises of God or doing it our way to try and get to those same promises. Like you're in a marriage that's not working well and someone starts to pay attention to you and people are telling you, that's great. You deserve to be happy. Go after it. That's why we fight fire with fire. We think when we are attacked by a certain type of weapon, the best way to attack back is with that same weapon. And so when we're made fun of or we're bullied, we do it back, only we do it worse. When we are attacked in public, we think the same things that we're attacked with is what we need to attack back with. And so anytime you're suffering, anytime you feel lost, anytime you feel like you can't get out of where you are and an opportunity presents itself, man, I get feeling this need to want to get out of it. And if there's somebody that you trust that tells you a way out, if there's an opportunity you see that makes sense, why would you not jump at it? You're so tired of running, you'll do anything, even if it means disobeying God. And that's where the problem comes in. Because God is the only one who can fulfill his promises in your life. You cannot fulfill the promises of God in your own life. Only God can do it. And he's going to only do it the way he wants to do it. The way he sees fit to do it. And sometimes the way he sees fit is going to take longer than you want it to take. Sometimes the way that he sees fit is going to be through harder situations than you want to go through. And you're going to have to decide if you can stay surrendered to what he has said to you, or if you're going to try and take control back for yourself. You're going to have to see if in those moments you trust that his plans are better than your plans, that he sees things that you don't see up ahead, that you know he won't bless disobedience, and that he is for you even in the midst of where you're suffering. Imagine if you were David in this instance. He thinks this is a quick and easy way to the throne, but how does this help him unite people? I'm the one who killed the one that most of you are following. Come follow me now. Most likely, killing Saul in that moment would have just made the civil war erupt even hotter, and more factions rise, and more enemies show up, and it would have taken the fingerprints of God off of the situation. Instead, he had to trust God enough to live the way that God was telling him to live in that moment, even when it wasn't popular or even when it wasn't easy. Romans 12:21 says, "Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." And you do that when you trust God. Because when you trust him, then suddenly he is the one who is responsible for the results, not you. When David finally reached the throne, no one could say David seized this by his own power and strength. They could only look at it and say, God has placed this man here. They could see him fulfilling his promises, not David controlling and manipulating the situation. For the first several years of Megan and I's marriage, we were in one wilderness after another. It was kind of this thing where you'd get a small victory and then something else would come, and a small victory and something else would come. We never really got out of that, which is where we lived. And it was where God taught us to trust him no matter what. All of this really came to a head when we were getting ready to leave Kansas City, where we were at, and go wherever God told us to go. In January of that year, God told both of us separately, and we had a conversation about it later, that it was time. It was time to start packing up. It was time to be prepared to move, because when it was time to go, it was going to be time to go quick. And so we trusted him in that. We started living with things packed in boxes. We were ready to do whatever it is he wanted us to do. And then things kept falling apart and getting more and more complicated. Megan got pregnant with our daughter Mallory during this time. Our lease kept running out, and we had to figure out what to do with it. Our job situations were iffy. Sometimes our car was a very unsafe thing to drive. I don't know how it was still on the road most of the days that we had it. And all through this time, months went by. Suddenly it is the fall, and we've had no prospects. Like, no one has called us back. No one has reached out. We have had no chance of moving forward from this place. And then an opportunity shows up. And it's not a bad opportunity. I don't think this was one opportunity that just showed up because it was all evil or something. It looked really good. One of the district superintendents from Florida showed up on campus, and I had a chance to talk with him. And he had an incredible situation. To go live by the beach on the Gulf Coast, to have support set of over $150,000 a year for 4 years, already there before anything shows up, that you get to use for your support and to use to do ministry. There was a house, there was a gym, there was a church, all sitting empty, all ready for me and whoever to come in and do whatever we wanted to do there. It looked like an incredible opportunity. It looked like an incredibly easy way out of this wilderness experience that Megan and I were in. And yet we prayed and we talked and we prayed some more. And God never said this was the place. In fact, he said this wasn't the place. And so we had to say no, right? If we wanted to be in control, we could say yes, but we wanted to be surrendered, we had to say no. Which was hard because everyone we talked to was saying, you should take this. Why would you say no to this? Your lease is up. This takes care of all the problems you have. It's a beautiful area. It's all this opportunity. The person that we had said no to called back multiple times. Are you sure? Why don't you just come down one time? We'll go scuba diving. I'll take you snorkeling through some shipwrecks. Really playing this up. Like, this was making it hard to say no. But we kept having to say no. Even though everything else was saying this was a good opportunity, we knew to do so would be to disobey God. About 6 weeks later, we get connected to this little church in Virginia called the West Point Church of the Nazarene. And it was all God's doing, the way things fell into place for us to even be having an opportunity to interview. And then we come out in November and we interview, and then we move over Thanksgiving, and we end up getting here 2 days before our final lease was up in Kansas City. Whatever has happened since that time when we came, we have never doubted how we got here was set by God and not by us. It wasn't something that we manipulated or took control of to get out of our wilderness. It was only because we let God lead us how he wanted to lead us. And we believe, I know for a fact, because of that, things have been better for us together and as a church and as a family than they would have been otherwise. Because God fulfills his promises his way. And when he's in charge of the results, he will bless you in ways that only he can. In the wilderness, and an opportunity to get out appears, just remember that not every opportunity is created equal. The question really is, who is in control? You can be in control, or God can be in control, but it can't be both. When you're in control, you're going to listen to all kinds of voices, and you may be willing to disobey God to get out of the current situation you're in. But just remember, you don't see as far as he does. You don't see as clearly as he does. And you might not know everything that will happen if you do it this way. Or you can keep trusting God to lead you and get you out. That the one who is with you in the midst of the wilderness will be the one who sees you through to the other side. It may look different than you want it to, but his way means that he's in charge of the results, not you. When you do it his way, it lets him bless you and bless the plan. And it is always better than what we can create on our own. So as you are in this place, wherever you're at, where you're in the wilderness and you don't know which way to go, but an opportunity is there, are you willing to put that opportunity in his hands? Are you willing to ask him whether or not to take it? Are you willing to surrender control of your life so that you can live in the promises of God? Lord, I pray that as we think about this week, we would let you be in control. Because we know that you will bless your plans done your way. And your promises are better than anything we can create for our own life. And so I pray that we would be willing to give up control so that you can be the one who leads us through to whatever it is you have planned for us. Because we know that you are for us, that you love us, and with you the best is yet to come. We pray these things in your name. Amen.